Freedom Council is nothing without all of you. How do we go about getting people held criminally responsible for their acts? The military is still at risk. Election interference, the medicalization of childhood. These drug dealers like Pfizer and Moderna, we can seize their property. We develop our litigation through conferences like this. It's going to come through communications. It's going to come through conversations. And Freedom Council is that conversation.
For information, visit freedomcouncil.org.
I knew as early as February 2020 that I needed to do something.
I recognized that there was a systematic problem and that this was not about hydroxychloroquine, it was something larger.
Fear shut the world down, and people made a lot of money at it as they were killing us.
I was asked to speak at a freedom rally that was set up to discredit my reputation.
Whoever orchestrated this must not have the safety of this nation in mind.
Medicine and politics should be separated. These doctors were handcuffed.
The American public has awakened. We have a new civil rights movement to restore our rights, and we're going to hold them accountable.
It is a natural progression of a man of God or woman of character to see injustice, to seek it out, and then to act upon it.
Do you hear me? We will never lock down again. This is the hill we die on.
Don't miss New American Heroes with attorney Warner Mendenhall and John Davidson, Mondays on BrokenTruth.tv.
You just have to flood a country's public square with enough raw sewage.
And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you.
Once they lose trust in their leaders, in mainstream media, in political institutions, in each other, in the possibility of truth, the game's won.
With Broken Truth. Hey, everybody. Sorry, we're coming. 1 second. Nope. And here we go. Hi, I'm John Davidson, and it is another lovely Monday. A little chilly for a lot of people. Today, we're discussing this crazy case in Florida, and I got a lot of people in this one. Let's just go right down the list. Let me turn off this graphic. Sorry, guys, I'm running the show by myself, so you get what you get. So today we have Dr. Larnell Birch, PhD, attorney Rachel Rodriguez, CF expert and survivor. I guess how do you describe that, Denise? Denise Cruz?
Person living with cystic fibrosis.
There you go. And another attorney from Freedom Council, Brian Festa from We the Patriots. Welcome, everyone. So this case is pretty ridiculous, frankly. This video of a mother whose child is basically being ripped from her arms has gone viral, and apparently it's not even a new case. It's about a year old, but it's finally getting attention, as these things tend to do. It's not always instant, and this video was so upsetting to me, it actually brought me out of a little social media hibernation I was in just to come out and fight about it. I think we should just play it and then discuss. What do you guys think? Yeah? All right, so...
Sounds good. And Brian, this was 2 years ago. This happened March 2024 is what we're about to watch.
Wow.
We've been pulling records from everywhere. Okay, so here's what's going to happen today. All right, and you need to yourself. We are taking Kenlee with us. Okay? Now, you can handle this one of two ways. You can show out and you can act a fool and you can make this difficult.
Or can my friend Jamie take her?
Stop. Let me finish. Don't interrupt me. You can show out and act a fool and make the situation worse. Or two, you can calm yourself, ask your questions, and then help us get her stuff and walk her to my car. The option is yours, but either way, make no mistake, she's coming with me tonight.
Why?
Because of the treatment you've refused and because of the doctors.
I'm not refusing treatment.
Don't interrupt me. That's twice. Because of the treatments you've refused and the
I would have chosen to act the fool. But wait, it gets worse. Here's a follow-up video as the mother is agreeing and facilitating the kidnapping of her own child against her will. This is unbelievable.
Okay. So once this is punctured, it has to be refrigerated. Okay. So it's 2 milliliters. There's 4 milliliters in there. Okay. And then
is this a shot or does it go in the machine?
No, it goes in the nebulizer.
Okay.
You mix 2 milliliters of that with 2 milliliters of this. Okay. And then once they're open, they have to go in the refrigerator. And then if I give you a bigger bottle, if I find a bigger bottle, they're only good in the fridge for 4 days. After they're filtered.
Just went away as an
Otherwise, they
adult.
don't have to be refrigerated.
Okay, sounds good.
You need me to write this down?
It would help if you could. This is temporary, Mama.
This is temporary, Mama. 2 years ago. Brian, do you want to weigh on this? I think you're sort of the subject matter expert on this legal case. You're not representing the mother. I just want to be very clear about that. But you are aware of many of the details. You want to just how did this happen? How did they get here? And why does she not have her child back yet? It was supposed to be temporary.
But yeah, and I just want to say from the outset, yes, I am not the child's or the mother's attorney. I am the vice president and co-founder of We the Patriots USA. We're a non-profit charitable organization and a public interest law firm that has provided legal representation and funding for this litigation. But I am not her actual counsel, so I have to be very clear on that. And I have to be very careful as well. I cannot release specific details of things that are in the court file, things that even some things that have already been shared publicly, if they were shared publicly after the protective order was put in place, because there is a protective order in this case. So I know some people don't agree with that. They want me to be giving details, but I'm not at liberty to, and I'm not even her attorney. But you know, I can say from just generically that everything that I have seen, and obviously, you know, you shared the body cam footage. It's been shared publicly. It's gone viral at this point. But everything that I have seen myself in the record or in what was, you know, privately shared with me again prior to all of this, I cannot find any justification for why this child was taken away from her mother at the time. You know, again, from everything that I understand, at the time of the abduction, I'll call it, the child was, you know, healthy as you can be with CF. Obviously, she had been improving. She was gaining weight. She was running around, laughing, playing without the assistance of oxygen at that time. And you know, my understanding is that yes, there was this drug Trikafta that was recommended, that was prescribed, ordered, whatever you want to say, by a hospital physician for the treatment of her CF, but that is not the only treatment available. It's not like there's only one drug that can treat this condition, and if you don't take this, you're going to die. That's not how it works. There are other treatments. There are treatments that have been around, as a matter of fact, for decades. And it's my understanding that Joy was pursuing other treatments, that she had been, you know, she had been in contact. She had brought her daughter to other physicians and had, you know, received other treatment. She was caring for a child. As a matter of fact, what I saw in that footage that was released is they're asking her for a medication. She's telling them, the mother's telling them the medication, running down the list of the medications. And she asked, "Do you want me to write this all down?" And at one point, they're like, "Yeah, that would be helpful." So, you know, she knew the child's treatment plan better than anyone and had a very detailed treatment plan for her. It's not like this is a case where she was just neglecting her. She has CF. We're just not going to treat her. We're just going to, you know, let her die or something like that. You know, obviously, if that had been the case and she was truly being neglectful and letting the child die and not giving her any kind of medical treatment, that would be a different case. And quite frankly, we wouldn't be supporting it. We wouldn't be funding it. That's not what happened here. Everything that I've seen and everything that everybody else who's looked at this case has seen, that I've been in contact with, there's no indication, despite a public statement that was released just last night from the Governor DeSantis's communications director, claiming that there are things in this file that they can't disclose, but once they're able to be disclosed, you'll see why we support what DCF did here. Well, they're seeing something that nobody else has seen then. And, I really question the validity and the veracity of such a statement, because obviously I haven't seen that. And anybody who's watched that body cam footage and all of the other information that's been released hasn't seen it. So I don't really know what they're talking about there. But the bottom line is, a child, they're reporting the child's safe. A child is safest with his or her mother and father, whatever the case may be. Child belongs with the parents. Foster care is not ever the safest place for a child, except in those specific cases where there is clear evidence of physical abuse or neglect, okay, or the child's in imminent danger of harm. And I have not seen that in this case. Again, if I saw any evidence of that whatsoever, I wouldn't be here talking to you. We wouldn't be involved in the case. Wow.
I think something, John, that Brian and I had spoken about. I don't know if you can hear me. My system's having a little lag.
Sorry.
Can you hear me, John? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry about that. One of the things that we had talked about, and I talked with this child's mother some time ago, where the goalposts change and they move. And so on the one hand, in the clip that you showed, there's an indication, expressly stated that the reason for Child Protective Services coming into the picture is because of refusal of medical treatment. And again, that there's no evidence of that I've seen. But now there's a question of, well, if that's not there and there's no evidence of that, now we're talking about the physical manifestation of this child. Is there malnourishment? Is there other signs of neglect? And Denise, who's here today, she and I were speaking about some of the issues involving, or the issues surrounding childhood diseases that have symptoms that manifest incorrectly, or I should say they manifest as though there might be malnourishment, neglect, and so forth, but it's an incorrect conclusion if people see that. So I know that Denise can speak to that. And I wanted to go into something that's going on in Florida. There's a bill in the Senate right now that addresses this very point. So Denise, if you wanted to speak on that a little bit and your knowledge of the case and kind of where CF causes these confusion points and where officials need to be more careful about how they review these kinds of cases. I know we talked about that.
Okay. I'd be happy to, thanks. And also, just before I address that, John, you had pulled up the black box warning on Trikafta, yes. And you'll notice that on there, they have a regimen as to when to test the liver levels. Kenlee's liver levels were not tested for 7 months at one point during her tenure with them. So it says every month during the first 6 months, then every 3 months during the next 12 months. And she had gone 7 months at one point without getting her liver level tested. So,
but Denise, they're doing this for the health of the child. How could they not test these things?
That's a good question. Okay.
And how could they not place her on the medication for what I've been told 3 or 4 months after she was taken from the mother? So if the child was in such imminent danger and she needed to be immediately placed on this medication, why didn't they do it?
She had to go on an international cruise with the foster family she was with first. That was more important.
They took the child on an international cruise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they did.
I didn't even know that part of it.
What? No, wait a minute. They took the child out of the United States of America with a foster parent.
Yes. It was a cruise with some stops. I don't know the details of the stops, but I remember there was concern about a CF patient like Kenlee going onto a cruise where it's known to be, bacteria fest on that. So there was concern about that, which she tried to, voice her concern and was shut down also about that.
And before you go into that, one
just
thing
to-
that bothers me a lot about that is if a parent who's under scrutiny did something like that, you know what the fallout would be. And
Absolutely.
yet somebody who doesn't even have the rights, the state's rights to the child, I want to talk about that at some point. But what the state deems rights over the children, that stranger can take a child out of the country. Are you kidding me? To me, that's appalling. When I heard that from Joy in December, I was just appalled.
One of the things I covered this case in Norway for two girls who were kidnapped from the state of Norway by Barnevernet, which is their DCF, was that the social workers had kind of a cartel collusion thing going on with the foster care families, and there was a profit margin involved. The children were worth $60,000 a year each to foster families, and if the children were difficult, there was a double pay, so they were getting $120,000. So this was essentially funding friends and family of the Barnevernet social workers' lifestyle. But I never heard of them taking kids on an international cruise. So Denise, you were saying, sorry, we interrupted you there.
It's okay. I brought it up. So back to the weight gain issue. People with cystic fibrosis, some of us are pancreatic insufficient, and we need to take digestive enzymes to absorb the nutrients of the food into our body. It's very hard for us to gain weight in most circumstances when you're pancreatic insufficient. I experienced this. So when we are sick, or even when we're not sick, if we don't have enough caloric intake, we lose weight very easily. In Kenlee's case, she was sick for a month or two. In addition to that, at the hospital, they wanted to give Kenlee an antibiotic. Kenlee, years prior, had an allergic reaction to the antibiotic in that she had chronic diarrhea, and those doctors wrote in her medical records they will never administer that again because it caused dehydration and everything like that. So at Sacred Heart, they wanted to put her on this. And again, Joy didn't refuse treatment here. She said, can we change to a different antibiotic so it doesn't give her this chronic diarrhea? Their answer for a 5-year-old was to put her in a pull-up and give her a probiotic. So because they did that, or during the time when they did that, she lost 4% of her body weight. So that, again, I guess they're trying to blame Joy for Kenlee's body weight when it's a manifestation of cystic fibrosis, and then they didn't take into account her experience with her own child. So I was curious this morning. As I said, I had seen before the actual hospital record. So after they took Kenlee on March 6th, March 12th, there was hospital notes. Kenlee was 3 feet 7.7 inches, I believe, and 34. I think it said 34 pounds at that point. So I put into
at what age?
Excuse me.
At what age was she?
She was 5 years old at that time.
Oh.
So I asked Copilot this morning, because that's the new thing. Ask Copilot everything. What's the average weight of a child? And I didn't even mention cystic fibrosis. With that height, and it gave me a range from 28 pounds to 44 pounds. So even at her worst, as they say, wherever they want to track that, Kenlee was in that window for a child without cystic fibrosis. So add into the equation cystic fibrosis, she was not doing poorly, and she was gaining weight as soon as she got out of the hospital with her mom. She started eating again. So when they talk about malnutrition, when I heard them talk about malnutrition in the that first hearing back in March 2024, they act like it's third world malnutrition, and it's not. she was down a few pounds. I myself was just sick in November and December of last year, 2025. And I lost like 7 pounds. I'm trying to gain it back. I know you can't tell through the sweater, but I have a lot of muscles. I am lean and muscular. I work out all the time as an adult. And I went down to 105 pounds. If I didn't have all the muscle, because we know muscle weighs more than fat, if I didn't have all the muscles, I would easily be below 100 pounds, and I'm 5'4". So I'm looking skinny now, and I'm working on, my caloric intake. And it's hard to do when you're not stuffing your face with Oreos and Snickers and all these things. And I can easily increase my weight, as Kenlee could, if you fed her all kinds of junk food. But I can tell you again from experience, I did that once to appease the CF center that I was at, because they said, if you're at a certain weight, your lung function will go up. So I had Reubens every day for a certain amount of time to get me to that certain weight. And yes, I was at the certain weight. My lung function didn't move, and I felt lethargic and just gross all the time. So I choose to eat healthy for myself. And that is another obstacle to gaining weight.
And that's, that raises another interesting point that sort of like the Cruz thing, that if a parent were actually doing that, you said they would be persecuted for doing that, yet it's okay for the foster parents. Joy, that would indicate, even if she were down a few pounds, and you said she was within the normal range. I'm not a medical expert, so I'm not going to speak on that. Mm-hmm. But assuming all of that is accurate, which I have no reason to doubt it, what you're essentially saying is if they're claiming that she was malnourished, as apparently they are, she would have had less of a chance of having her child taken away, feeding her an unhealthy diet, like you said, giving her Oreos, junk food all day, than feeding her the healthy diet that I have every reason to believe Joy was feeding to her. Mm-hmm. She was giving her a healthy diet and trying to get her to the optimum health through, giving her real food, not junk food. And she's essentially being punished for that, because if she had given her junk food, you're right, she would have gained more weight with junk food than giving her, real, healthy fats and meats and vegetables and fruits and things that she was feeding her. So she would have been actually in a better case if she had given her junk food. That's just like, it's really the indicators. It's very clear to me that they did not really have, it seems to me from everything that I've seen, they didn't understand her medical profile. Mm-hmm. Not anywhere near the way that Joy did. Mm-hmm. So it's
go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can we get Dr. Barnell? I'm sorry, Dr. Birch.
I wanted to point out one. Yeah, I wanted to ask
Dr.
Birch her opinion on this.
Right. I think the key part here, something that even many medical professionals don't understand, is that CF symptoms fluctuate wildly. A child can look sick 1 week and be much better the next week without any neglect or wrongdoing on the part of the parent. That's the nature of the disease. And that's where the danger comes in for parents, because medically complex kids are at high risk for medical kidnapping. That's a fact.
I've had friends with children with CF, and they gave those kids every single opportunity for the best health they could have, and they still got sick sometimes. Right. Sometimes they would get pneumonia. They'd have to go into the hospital. It was just a component of the reality of the disease. So it's almost like the state of Florida is cherry picking what it considers neglect. And by the way, a typical weight range is very broad. I have one child who's on the top end of her scale, and I have another child who's on the bottom end. They're both fed the same meals. Children just have different DNA for how they process these things. So a CF child, I'm sure, is going to be a little smaller, maybe for a lot of reasons.
Right, they typically are smaller.
But you know what? I think we should show everybody. Let's just see what this neglected child looks like. The mother sent me a few pictures of her with her daughter, and that child looks pretty normal to me. Doesn't seem to be unhappy here. Oh, and look, she's having Christmas like neglected children do. And this is her, I think, a little younger with an older sister. You know, this is nothing about this is normal. And what's more upsetting is it happens all the time. Who can speak to that?
Well, you know, I can talk about the cases we've seen all over the country. No, I'm sorry. I'm not going to say much except that, you know, we've had cases everywhere from Florida to Idaho to Missouri to Connecticut. You can look at the profiles of those states, at least when it comes to Connecticut versus Florida or Idaho. It's a pretty big disparity in the political leanings. And yet I've seen the exact same thing. I've seen parents be investigated or threatened to have their children taken away from something as simple as declining a vaccination at their, 1 month newborn appointment, which I saw in Connecticut. And I've seen cases in Florida like this. I've seen a case in Missouri where 4 children were taken away, not just the child in question, but all the rest of the minor children were taken out of the home simply because the parents were using an alternative treatment for their son's autism and some of his other disabilities. And he was showing improvement, by the way. He was showing great improvement on that treatment. He wasn't showing, again, it's another case where there were absolutely no signs of abuse or neglect. Physical neglect, even his blood work was perfect. He had just had a physical. There were no signs of abuse or neglect, and they took this child out of the home along with his 3 siblings. This was a nonverbal autistic 6-year-old child, placed him from foster home to foster home, ended up in 4 different foster homes before we were able to successfully get him returned to his parents. That was in Missouri. Again, supposedly a conservative state. So conservative, liberal, it doesn't matter. This is happening everywhere, and it is a scourge on this nation. Medical kidnapping is a hidden scourge. Not enough people are talking about it, but we here at We the Patriots USA have made a commitment to end medical kidnapping in America, and that's why we're going into all these different states and getting involved in these cases.
You know, this, you said Sacred Heart. Would that be Ascension Sacred Heart in Pensacola? Okay.
I think so.
You know, a lot of people watch this video and privately tell me that they would be, if that were them, they would be currently in jail on murder charges. Especially with that monster on the left smirking while an armed officer of the state of Florida and a psychopath stands there demanding that they not be interrupted. I mean, I watched the video and I was like, this could probably end a lot differently in many instances.
So that's
amazing. The mother held her mouth.
That's a great point, John, because from the beginning of all these accusations, DCF has said that Joy was, I don't know if they used the word combative, but belligerent, argumentative in the hospital. I was on the hospital calls. I never heard her raise her voice. I don't know how I would have kept it together. And we all saw calm Joy in that video. She's not a violent person. She's not an aggressive person, even when this is happening to her. So the allegations from the beginning have just been totally fabricated. They have no proof
phenomenal
of that.
Restraint.
Yeah.
She kept her composure more than I'd say 90% of parents would have.
Absolutely.
And we did not advocate, none of us here advocate for violence, of course.
Right.
She did the right thing in keeping her composure, letting the process play out, as horrific as it was. I'm not ever going to tell a parent they should resist, law enforcement or anyone else. There's a legal process. That's what lawyers are for. That's what court is for. Judges are for. Go through that process. But I can't believe that she's been separated so long. Like you said, it was mentioned in the video, this is just temporary. This is just temporary. And 2 years later, she's still separated from her daughter. This is heartbreaking as a parent. I'm a parent. I know many of you probably are, maybe all of you are. It is so difficult to watch this as a parent, to think, what if that happened to my child, and how would you react in that situation? I have trouble keeping my emotions in check, even as an attorney. I'm supposed to be all level-headed and stuff. No, I have trouble keeping my emotions in check when it comes to children, and as a parent, certainly when it comes to my child, or my children, I should say. I don't know how she did it, how she just remained calm, and went over the medication list and talked to them. I mean, she was crying. Obviously, she was emotional, but she did everything right in this case.
Yes. And I'm sorry, John. Going back to the weight issue, it's interesting to me that the weight issue was never brought up with her, the doctor that was caring for her under cystic fibrosis. It was never an issue until DCF got involved. Because if it were, there'd be another option, not just Trikafta, a G tube, a feeding tube. That's very common in people with cystic fibrosis. So to not explore a feeding tube and to take her away, even if it was, just the charge of malnutrition, that again, it's a false reason to take the child. So now we have 3 reasons that DCF claimed they took her away. A lung transplant, because she wouldn't accept the black box medication, and malnutrition. And we have, the first one was just blatantly untrue, the lung transplant. She never needed a lung transplant. People see that she was caring for her daughter, and Trikafta should have been carefully considered. And third, if malnutrition was an issue, there was no mention of it before, and a different solution would have been a G-tube.
Well, have they weighed the child to see if the malnutrition has been corrected? Now that she's had 2 years.
2 years older, 2 years taller. So, of course, she has gained weight. Can we attribute that to Trikafta? Not necessarily.
A few days later, she was taken to a CF Center hospital, and the doctors there pronounced her well-nourished and healthy. And this was days after she was taken from her mother.
Yes, I believe that's that March 12th hospital report that I was referencing earlier.
So, 6 days later. That's ridiculous. So, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but cases like this, typically there is a gag order or a denial of public speaking about this kind of thing that parents are put under. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's not uncommon. This one was pretty broad, but I haven't seen gag orders or protective orders, I should say, in every single state and every single family court. So I can't speak to how it is in every state. But yes, I mean, that is not uncommon to protect the children, and also the integrity of the investigation, and also the employees of the agency. However, I will say, and I will just speak for myself, as a public servant for 20 years and a state government employee, not in the state of Florida, for 15 years, I was always very transparent. I did not agree. I never agreed with the position, and I was in a legal department of an agency. I even worked as an administrative law judge at another agency. I never agreed with decisions that were made to hide things from the public, unless it was obviously a clear security risk to the parties involved. Right. But I don't believe that state agents should be acting under the cover of darkness. If you're going to someone's home, body cam footage is, that's public records. That's subject to public records requests, police cam footage. I don't believe public servants should ever be acting under this veil, this cover of darkness. Anything that you're going to do out in public, if I can see it from the street, certainly what we saw in that body cam footage could have been recorded from the street, maybe not inside the house, but anything that a public servant is doing should be subject to scrutiny, should be subject to surveillance by the public, because we need to be the guardians. We need to watch the watchmen, so to speak. Police the police, whatever you want to say. We need to have our eyes on this and show this to the light of day, especially when it's coming to something so egregious as potentially taking a child away without just cause from their parents, taking her out of her home. Nobody's talking about this. What kind of mental health damage is this doing to the child and to the mother, but particularly to the child? That's what I'm most concerned about at this moment. what damage has this done to the child, to her mental health? You're talking all about her physical health. That's of primary importance, of course, when you have a serious medical condition. But it is very, very important also to consider the child's mental well-being. And how is that good for her mental health to be separated from her mother like that? And what kind of damages have been suffered both by the mother and the child in terms of, the emotional distress and the psychological stress this has put, the PTSD that this child's going to have probably, and the mother. We're not even nobody really has even talked about that yet, but that should be a very, very real consideration as well. You don't just look at, there's a physical problem, and regardless of what happens, we need to immediately take her away from her mother. No, I mean, the mother said, I'm not refusing treatment. I just watched it with you. I'm not refusing treatment. And she told her, stop, you're interrupting. Basically, shut up. Wouldn't even let her talk. So she says she's not refusing treatment. And everything that I understand about the case is she hadn't made any decision to refuse treatment, that she was looking at other treatments. She was giving her another treatment already. She was researching this Trikafta. She was in the process of considering all of her options when the child was taken away. I never saw a definitive, I'm refusing treatment. She even said right at the door, I am not refusing treatment. So at that point, why didn't they stop and say, okay, wait, what did you say again? You're not refusing it. So you are going to give her this drug. Okay, well, maybe we've got it wrong here. Maybe we shouldn't be taking this child away. So you're going to sign an agreement to give it to her. I've seen in other states they do that. They give you a choice. You can sign this agreement. You're gonna, and even the parents it's under duress in my opinion at that point, because you get a police officer at the door and you get agents ready to take your child away. But be that as it may, parents usually will sign that right away. She wasn't given that option to say, okay, I'll give her the treatment, just don't take her away. No, it was, this is final. We've already made up our minds. And guess what? We don't even need a warrant or court order. We can just take her right out of your home. That's wrong as well, because if that is truly the law in the state of Florida, I'm not a Florida attorney, but if that is the law in the state of Florida, that needs to be changed. There needs to be probable cause before you take a child. There needs to be a showing of probable cause before you rip a child out from the home, just like you would have to do for a search warrant or anything else. It shouldn't be, we can do this and ask questions later, and we'll show the evidence later, but we can take a child away. No, that is one of the most extreme violations of liberty, of parental rights, that you can do to someone. I mean, short of jailing them, that's one of the most extreme things you can do. Infringements on somebody's liberty is to take their child away.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but if they were in Pensacola, they've taken the child to Jacksonville, 5-6 hours away for foster care.
I'm not sure.
So
about that.
Yes,
the child is halfway across the state away from her mother. How is this legal?
I mean, I don't make the laws in the state of Florida. You'd have to ask the lawmakers, talk to the lawmakers. I mean, we've a lot of people I know since this went viral, they've been reaching out to lawmakers. They reached out to the governor's office. We saw the statement on X just last night from the governor's communications director. I don't know what's going on there. I mean, of course, it's easy to say because everything's sealed, because we're not allowed to release information, we can't tell you, but just trust us that everything was done correctly here and that the child is safe and there was justification for taking away. Just trust us. We can't tell you. I mean, it's easy to hide behind that. Now, yes, it's true. It may be true that they're not allowed to discuss things publicly, but that's nice. That's a nice cover for them, right? To be able to say, oh, well, we can't tell you because we're not allowed to, but just take our word for it. I don't take anyone's word for anything. I don't trust government officials, whether they're in the DeSantis administration, the Trump administration, the Biden administration. I don't care what political party you are. I never blindly trust government officials and trust a statement. I need to see the evidence. As lawyers, we're trained. We need to look at the evidence before we're making claims in court. For instance, we have an obligation, a duty, an ethical duty to verify and see everything before even though I'm not the attorney in this case, just as providing litigation funding, even I believe I hold it to be my ethical obligation to verify. So I did, verify details with the parties involved before we even got involved, and talk to other people who've been involved in the case before we even got involved. Because if there were clear evidence of abuse, if this was a case of a mother beating her child or something, or starving her, we wouldn't be involved in this case. We'd be supporting the state in that case. But no, I did not see any of that kind of evidence. So, again, I would caution people against just, there's other prominent people that are backing DeSantis. for whatever reasons, political reasons or whatever, that are coming out with, there are public personalities, people that I even respect, that are coming out with statements now on social media. Hey, if DeSantis says it, if his administration says it, we should just trust it because they're pro-medical freedom. Well, you know what? That's politically convenient. That may be politically the right thing for them to say. But I'm telling you, do not just trust your government officials. Demand accountability from your government.
Agreed. And and when I look into these cases, oftentimes I think, well, there's probably going to be some, at least small smoking gun that justifies why something was done. But I know in the case of Norway, there was none. There was none. And so far, I mean, the child does not look like there was neglect, which means they committed fraud upon the court to pull the child out, correct?
Well, I mean, to me, honestly, again, I have to look into what the laws are actually about making false reports or mandated reporters. I know in my former home state in Connecticut, it was a criminal offense to file a false report of abuse or neglect. If, there's the mandated reporters law on the one hand, of course, which says in Connecticut within 12 hours of finding evidence or hearing even a report from a child or anyone involved that there's been abuse of a child, whether it's sexual abuse, physical abuse, or neglect, whatever the case may be, you have to make within 12 hours a report, or you can be convicted of a felony. And it's also a criminal violation, though, to file a false report. Now, what happens with state officials is usually they have what's called qualified immunity. So they really can't be touched. I think if that's the case in Florida as well, that needs to be changed because there needs to be accountability. There needs to be a law, I would say, in every state, that if you take a child from their parent and it's later found that you did not have probable cause, sufficient evidence, or something was fabricated, whatever the case may be, that you can be criminally prosecuted. That would stop a lot of this dead in its tracks because they would be like, oh, well, we really better have real evidence. We better be able to prove it. And that would stop a lot of this if they can be criminally prosecuted. It's my understanding they can't be as government officials in most cases, and they won't be. But I mean, Rachel, I know you're having a little trouble with your connection. If you can still hear us, she can speak better as to what the Florida law is because she's a Florida attorney. I'd have to look and research the laws more. I don't want to say, but if you can speak to that, Rachel, what the laws are as far as those matters and the accountability of making a false report and things like that.
Yeah, Rachel, what's the crime involved in fraud upon the court and claiming the child was neglected, but then 6 days later, medical says, no, that's not the truth?
Well, this is, as best I know, this is and I'm sorry I'm having so much connectivity. Actually, it's very selective over here. I only have problems on very important podcasts. So I apologize to everyone. This is still in the realm of a civil matter. And so it's not necessarily, one thing that could happen would be sanctions. Because the party that's involved in making the false statements could either be the Child Protective Services as a governmental agent or in reporting what a private hospital or medical provider was saying in records. I think maybe it might be difficult, but I think there would be, I would certainly be reviewing whether there would be sanctions involved there. I think one of the things we might be talking about is the perjury, the crime of perjury. And even if it's a civil matter, you could still be referred for criminal charges if you lie under oath to a court. I'm not certain because I haven't had a chance to look at the specifics of this lie as to whether or not that would be considered perjurious. But I certainly would recommend that the attorneys in this case review that. I think we need to be looking at every possible opportunity for accountability in a case of medical kidnapping. And something I wanted to address earlier is I think a very fundamental issue. And I apologize in my going in and out if I didn't hear somebody speak on this. But to me, one of the fundamental problems, and you can see it in that video, in the attitude of the agents as they're coming to take the child, is that somehow there is an authority by the state to sever the relationship between parent and child. And I would say absolutely not. Even in the cases where a state the community, the society deems that a child is truly in danger, say, criminal kind of activities towards a child, and we all, as decent people, want to protect that child, protect the innocents. Even in those cases, it is wrong, it is morally incorrect to assume that the state has the authority by virtue of perhaps giving that authority to parents and therefore being able to take away. It does not have that right. That is a God-given right. And it carries with it the responsibilities. So to a certain degree, the state's only authority here is to enforce the responsibilities. And I don't think that one of the ways that can do that is by permanently severing ties. That's only on paper. That's only legally. And I think that the state is going to be held accountable, and the courts, as part of the state, are held accountable for doing so. And in light of that, I think that it's very, very, I think Brian touched on this. It's very, very important that these kinds of actions by the state, if at all happening, need to be always temporary. Always, there has to be built-in safeguards to say there is a review here, instead of going all the way to 2 years later, all the way going to severing permanently of parental rights. What has been the rehabilitation efforts? Has there ever been an audit of the case? What was considered to be the problem before, has that been rectified? These are the kind of things I've heard of in other family cases, and I'm sure Brian can speak to this in other states. But this has to be required by an agency if that agency is going to dare to come in between a parent and child. And in this case, this would have been over. Instead of the goalposts keep moving against this parent, this would have been over, and the child would have been back in her mother's custody had there been a true review of what was going on and a desire or an end goal of restoration, rehabilitation, whatever was considered or deemed to be the problem here. If that had been reviewed and the purpose was the best interest of the child being with the parent, because that is the morally correct thing, we wouldn't even be here talking about this. And so that's something that really troubles me. And I haven't seen legislation on that. Frankly, I don't think it's a legislative issue. I think it's a moral paradigm issue. But I did want to ask earlier when I was having some tech issues, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Senate bill that's currently in session. It just went through the first committee hearing, and I believe it's going through the next shortly. I don't know what that date is, but I believe it's SB 42, and that is directly addressing the concern that Child Protective Services can immediately take away children, even on a temporary basis, when those children have childhood diseases. One of them mentioned actually is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is something I suffer from, so I understand that. I didn't see that CF was directly on the list, but maybe we can talk about that, and I don't know if Dr. Birch has some commentary on that. But the idea is the protection of parents and children in cases where children have manifestation of diseases that can be confusing to anyone that sees it without any context or knowing what the care of that child is. And I think we really need to support laws like this. There always has to be more speed bumps, if you will, at minimum, against overreach by the state.
Yes, and Rachel, I have a question for you because I did actually just briefly look at the law, and apparently it is a felony, from what I can see, in Florida to make a false report. But what they would need to do is include a provision to waive the state's immunity for DCF workers, because you can explicitly waive immunity by statute. So this idea of qualified immunity is unless it's been explicitly waived by the state. So the state needs to waive that is what needs to happen. But my question to you is, in these proceedings in Florida, because again, I don't practice in Florida, how soon does the parent get a hearing after the child has been taken away? Because obviously in a criminal case, you have to have an arraignment within so many hours of the arrest, right? You can't just leave someone in jail for 2 weeks and not have them arraigned, not have them appear before a judge and make a plea. They get to make a plea. They get to talk to a judge within a certain number of hours. Does a parent get, to make the case in front of a judge within a certain number of hours or days to say my child was wrongfully taken away? Look, I'm not doing what they're saying I'm doing. Give my child back. At least, while this is going on and this can all be sorted out. I mean, the default, I would think, should be keep the child with the parent unless, pending this, unless there's imminent danger or there's already been proof that the child's been harmed. Obviously, if the child has broken bones, bruises, they reported, sexual abuse, things like that. In those kinds of very egregious, extreme cases, you need to immediately remove the child from the home. But I'm not talking about those cases. I'm talking about cases like this, where they're just arguing about a difference of a medical opinion from one doctor to the next. I mean, what is the mechanism for going before a judge and pleading your case as a parent? Is there any mechanism? Is there any timeline?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. And I just want to caveat what I'm going to say is that this is not an area that I practice in. But as I understand it, I believe that in Florida, similar to what you're talking about, that the shelter hearing is what I believe it's called, has to occur within 24 hours of the child being taken from the home. I'm sure that there's other contingencies there that can change that time frame. But that's what I understand it is. And to your point about the felony of false report, I know that's the case of making a false police report. However, in the state of Florida, my understanding is a report of a child's welfare is not necessarily a police report. So I'm actually interested in clarification. Is a report made to Child Services also falling under that same felony statute with regard to making a false statement to the police? Is that how it's framed?
Well, I saw it in abuse and neglect, making a report of
Okay.
abuse or neglect. So I didn't see it restricted to. Now, again, I have to clarify that I am not a Florida attorney, so maybe I'm reading something wrong. But what I saw, I'll just look at it again, was Florida statutes, Title 5, Chapter 39, proceedings related to children. And it says, that it talks about making a false report. It talks about, obviously, the obligation to report. A person who, this is subsection 9, a person who knowingly and willfully makes a false report of child abuse, abandonment, or neglect, or who advises another to make a false report is guilty of a felony of the 3rd degree, punishable as provided in a list of statutes. Anyone making a report who is acting in good faith is immune from any liability under this subsection. So that's the key.
That's where the problem is, right? Because it was the hospital making a claim, we believe, as far as I understand. Maybe Denise, because you were there in the early onset of this particular case, you can answer that. But I think the problem is they're always going to, somebody's always going to fall back on, well, this was in good faith. I'm a professional. I'm the doctor.
But how is that in good faith when the doctor?
I know.
Who was the doctor?
This is what I want to ask, though. I have a legitimate, sincere question. How is it in good faith if the doctor, unless she has said, no, I am not going to provide any treatment, I'm refusing this drug and all other drugs, I'm not going to treat my child, I'm going to let her die. Unless she has made a statement like that, what evidence in the world did this doctor have that she was not providing treatment to the child? It's my understanding she didn't even say no. She didn't even say to the doctor, no, I'm not going to put her on that drug. She didn't even say that. Is what my understanding.
Yeah.
So how is that in good faith?
Well, and here's where we get into something you and I know very well, Brian, and that is the court system needs serious reform. And I think there's a lot of components to that, and I'm not putting a particular finger on any particular individual on the bench. What I'm trying to say, though, is there's this entropy, well, if the professionals say it, then it must be right. And we saw that in the last 5 years. And so in order for this issue of good faith belief to make a claim of abuse and neglect, in order to decide whether that was good faith or not, it has to be raised in a court. And then there has to be evidence on that point. And by the time you get down that road, the child's already, not in the custody of the parent for a long period of time. There's already a record against that parent, true or false. And that is what's going to be picked up. We've even seen that in the social media commentary on this particular case. Well, there must be more to it. The officials must have known what they were doing. This can't be the whole story. And while I applaud generally the public trying to be more measured about things that seem emotionally, extraordinary, I generally applaud that. I also see that it's not equally applied. In this case, with this egregious violation of a parent's rights and the child's rights, We have people concerned and saying this isn't the whole story, but we don't see that in other things that are politically expedient. But in this particular instance, I think we need to look at more. One of the reasons I'm very happy, I'm going to say it this way. One of the reasons I'm happy that this case has gone viral and the issue has gone viral is because the problems that need to be reformed in the court system, this sort of sense that if the officials say it, it's all fine. If they're bringing the evidence, it must be legitimate. If they're seeking a motion in limine or some other bar to evidence coming in, it must have validity. All of that sort of professional winking and nodding goes on behind closed doors. And the only way that I've seen in all the cases I've been looking at to address that and to have accountability in the courts is public vision on, a public eye on what's going on behind closed doors. And again, that's another element in my view. That one is the courts, and the other is this creation of records that appear to be official records that then become evidence. And while we do use that, we as lawyers, litigators use those kinds of records all the time. We need to, and the public needs to be aware that there are creations of records that are, as somebody I know calls it, the self-licking ice cream cones. They're the very imposition or the express statement in some record, including in hospital records, that this is what is going on, then now has its own life and snowballs into something. And at the end of the day, it might be entirely fabricated. There may be no truth to it at all, but the record itself has taken on a life of its own. And it makes it sound like I'm saying that there's this very dire situation, and the very system, the judicial system that we believe in to help us hold accountable the other branches of government and private actors is also something that we can't trust in. I don't mean it to be that dire, but I do think it's important for the public and for parents to understand that they can't just trust the processes, that there are some of these baked in weaknesses. I don't want to go too far with that. I'll just call it a weakness. But we need to be aware of this, and we need to be keeping our own records and very carefully recording things that are happening where our rights and our children's rights are at stake.
And I just want to piggyback on that because I'm going to touch on this in something that I'm going to release a little bit later on my own Substack podcast. No, we can't necessarily trust all of the processes in government. Certainly not when it comes to DCF, CPS. We can't trust that there's never any bad actors or there's never any false information or reports. And like I said, we should just never blindly trust the government. However, we do need to respect the process. We need to respect the legal process that's in place and work within the confines of the process, because there's a lot of people out there. And again, I'm going to talk about this separately, but I want to say it here as well. There's a lot of people out there that have reached out to me asking for more details, asking me to go public with more details about the case, because the governor's office is saying one thing, we're saying another thing, and they want to know the details, what's actually in the case file, what's actually being said at these hearings. Number one, I'm not even privy to the case file because I'm not the attorney on the case. Number two, I'm not even at the hearings. I wasn't at the hearing last week. I know that a hearing took place. That's all I can say. And that there's another one scheduled. That's all I'm allowed to say. But I don't really know specifically what was even. So, I mean, I guess that gives me, that's actually better because I can't disclose what I don't know. But anything that I say is speculative as far as that. And that's why I won't speak to the hearings, but I'm just saying, respect the process, because we don't want to do anything that's going to harm.
Yeah, sure.
We don't want to harm the chance of anything that's going to do injury to the process and harm the chances of this girl being united with her mother.
That's right.
So that's our primary importance right now. That's a primary objective, is getting her reunited. We don't want to, we're not on a witch hunt. Somebody was like, there are people out there that are harassing, trying to dox these workers. I don't support that. Okay. I know you're angry. Be angry, have a righteous anger, but respect the process.
The process also includes reporting the medical doctor to the Medical License Board of Florida for fraud.
It could.
That's a process. Who's the doctor again? Do we know that? Can we say it?
I can't say the name of any doctors because I haven't been given express permission to do that, but Certainly, if there are doctors who have made a false report, and I'm not saying, listen, I have not made any criminal allegations here or criminal charges. I'm not, I don't have the authority or the ability.
Well, the board investigates.
The
That's
court,
what they do.
Well, not just the court, the DA, you call it DA in Florida, right? The district attorney could make a prosecution, could bring charges, has the ability to bring charges. So if there's a referral made, if someone makes a referral that the doctor did something criminal here and made a false report, then yes, that would be incumbent on the DA, and that's the prosecutorial discretion. They don't have to bring charges in every single case that's referred to them. But that I don't have the authority to bring criminal charges. So I'm not a criminal defense attorney anyway, or a prosecutor, and I never have been. So I want to stay out of that talk. But yes, if a crime's been committed, certainly whoever's involved and has knowledge of that crime, I would encourage them to make a referral, and then it's incumbent on the district attorney to investigate that, or the attorney general's office also, maybe in tandem with the AG's office, since this is a state agency involved in this case, to investigate that. And if they want to bring charges, they can bring charges. And quite honestly, listen, if that's happened in this case, whether we're talking about the civil side or the criminal side, if there's been wrongdoing by state actors, by government actors, or by the doctor, that should come to light. And I know politically, I'm not a politician, but from what I've been told, I've spent a lot of time around politicians in my life, and politicians and people, elected officials in government, have a tendency, the knee-jerk reaction is to protect their own, right? And they think that in most cases, by providing cover for their agencies, I'm not talking about DeSantis or anyone, I'm not naming names, but a lot of times what I've seen in states is that they'll provide cover even if they know they've done wrong. They'll provide cover for them because they believe it's going to do it's going to be politically harmful or scandalous to admit that there was wrongdoing in their own agency. I would encourage everyone in any state that any governor, if you discover wrongdoing in your agency, it is politically advantageous for you to show it to the light of day, to get up there at a podium and say, this happened on my watch. I just discovered it though, and I'm not going to allow it in my state where these people have been fired and we're doing criminal investigations on them, and to expose that. The people are going to respect that, and you're going to gain a lot more voters by doing that than trying to shield and provide cover for them.
Except, Brian, and I wholeheartedly agree, that's the right thing. And politicians should be doing what is right, and they need to worry about the legal fallout separately. But what happens is, unfortunately, our profession has created a scenario in which you always deny or you stay silent, because otherwise it can be used against you in court. And I would posit that your position is the correct one. Repent first, and then figure out the consequences of the failure later. Even if it can be used against you in court, if it's still wrong, it's wrong. Why are you defending it now? Deal with it later. And if the agency or the administration or whatever the case may be, whoever's involved in a particular instance, ends up having to pay fees to the people, I think that's what we've signed up for if we go into politics.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but hallelujah, good. The taxpayers of Florida, if my tax money went out to pay a judgment because a citizen was harmed and my governor did the right thing and stood up, right. I'm glad state money was paid out to them. I'm happy. I'm going to vote for you. I'm going to vote for you. I'm going to work on your campaign. I'm going to tell everyone I know to vote for you, because I'm glad the state had to pay that out as a resident. If I'm a resident of Florida and that happened, if wrongdoing is discovered and DeSantis uncovers it and announces it, I mean, honestly, he's probably going to make a run for president. I think that would help him tremendously. Look, when does a governor ever do this? When do you ever see a governor admitting that there was wrongdoing and exposing it and making it right for the people that were harmed? I mean, that is so rare in politics and in government. And so if he actually did that, I think he would be praised. And the legal fallout, listen, you don't have to give details of the case. You don't have to name names. You can say the persons involved are being investigated, and those who have anyone who's discovered to have committed a crime will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Because honestly, that helps you on the civil side. If there's a civil suit, it limits the damages that they can claim, that they can recover, because it shows that you got out ahead of it. You went after these people. You put an end to it. You got this child reunited with her mother, which limits the compensatory damages they can seek. If this goes on for another year or two, she's got way more damages than if you stepped in and put a stop to it right now. So again, I'm not advising the governor. I'm not giving legal advice. I'm not a practitioner in Florida, but I'm just saying, if I were talking to someone in my own state, if I were advising, for instance, a governor in a state that I am, admitted to practice in. That would be my advice. Get out ahead of it and limit the damages, because there is going to be, in many of these cases, you'll see civil suits. We saw it. Well, I'm not even going to mention specific suits that we're working on right now, but we've seen it in many cases. Get out ahead and limit the damages.
There's something important that, speaking of reunification, Denise, you said that there was something about, well, you go ahead and say it.
Yeah, so circling back to mental health and the damage this has done to this 3-person family here. The mom, Joy, did have 2 independent psychological evaluations back in 2024, and each of them recommended reunification. But DCF has never shown any movement towards reunification. In fact, it's been the opposite. As recently as today, little Kenlee, in a visit, brought up, "Mom, when I come home to see you," and the visitation supervisor at this public visitation center that they need to meet at told Joy she's not allowed to talk to Kenlee about coming home. And Joy said, "I never signed anything, and there's no court order that said I can't talk about Kenlee coming home." But even at that level, at her private visits with her kid, she can't even talk about Kenlee coming home, despite 2 psychological evaluations. That there's no reason why.
Ron DeSantis needs to step in on this one and pardon the mother, if there's any kind of pardon that can be given for this ridiculousness. Frankly, I think this whole thing is preposterous. I think those people need to be fired. I don't know who hired those idiots that went to the house. They're lucky they didn't get shot based on how they were acting. Truthfully, this is Florida. Half you guys are crazy as it is from what they say outside of the state. The nuts roll south, we say in Georgia.
Well, DeSantis, here's what DeSantis can do. Okay? Here's what DeSantis can do. DeSantis can't step in and, cancel a court order, a protective order. He can't lift a protective order. He doesn't have authority. The court's a separate branch of government. So we have separation of powers, right? So he doesn't oversee the judicial branch. He doesn't have any authority over this judge. But what he can do, since he does have authority over his own agency, and DCF is one of his executive branch agencies.
That's right.
He can tell them, if he sees evidence, as we've seen, that this was wrong, this child should be reunited with the mother, he can order them to change their position, to say, okay,
That's right.
we've decided we're going to return custody to the, now unless there's some law I don't know about, but in most states the governor would have authority, or the DCF commissioner would have the authority to do this at the governor's direction, maybe, to say, look, we need to reunite this. We're going to withdraw our motions, our court motions. They are the party that brought this into court. They can withdraw it. And so they have the ability to do that. He doesn't have authority over the judge, but he does have authority over DCF.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. These are important things. I think a lot of people are going to start looking into, was the drug under any sort of, or the manufacturer of the drug under any sort of clinical trial relationship with the hospitals associated with this case? Were the people that are maintaining foster care, were they somehow associated maybe with the social workers? Do CF patients have a higher payout to foster care parents than normal children? Not that they're not normal, but you know what I mean? They have more complications. I bet you start following the money. Who is the judge? What is the political affiliation of the judge? Why would they start restricting access to information to the public? Why would they gag a mother? Because this is clearly ridiculous. Why isn't the medical board of Florida getting involved in looking at the doctor who states that the child is malnourished, but then 6 days later, another medical facility says the child is well nourished? I mean, these are all like really simple, easy to prove questions that need to be answered. And I hope, as we're wrapping up, that we get this child back with her mom. This is stupid.
Well, on that note,
final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, my final thought on that, I just wanted to say before we close is, right now, what she needs more than anything is prayer. That's the first thing. All right. Pray for this mother, for this child, for this family, that the mother is reunited with her daughter. That's the number one thing I'm going to say, because that's always the most important. God's in control way more than any of us are here on earth involved in this or any other case. The second thing, after you pray, please prayerfully consider a donation to her legal fund, which we have established. All of the proceeds from this fund are going to her legal expenses. We're not keeping it for ourselves. We have a lot of different cases here, and we are our budget is very limited here. We're not one of these huge nonprofit law firms with millions of dollars. We don't have enough money to front all of her legal expenses. It needs to be funded by the people. So as of right now, the fundraiser is up to, I'm going to give you a real-time update.
Give me a website. Give me a website. I'll put it on the screen.
WeThePatriotsUSA.org. You'll find the fundraiser right on the homepage with a picture of Kenlee. It says help bring Kenlee home. And it's $11,256.30 out of $25,000. Only 45% at goal. So we're not even at 50% of our goal yet. That's concerning to me, considering this has already gone viral in some very large accounts with hundreds of thousands, 500,000 followers almost have shared this story and with the fundraiser, and still it's not even at 50%. So I know times are tough. I know we just got over the holidays and year-end giving season, and people are probably really strapped. But I can't help when these stories come up. We take the cases as they come to us. It came to us in December, so obviously it was like the worst time of year to be asking people for money, and I get that, but we absolutely need to fund this. All the donations, since we are a 501c3 nonprofit, all donations to We the Patriots USA are tax deductible within the guidelines, of course, of tax law, IRS guidelines and regulations. But since we are a nonprofit, in most cases, yes, you can take a tax deduction by making, if that's important to you, by making a donation. But right now, we just need to get her home. We have a very good attorney working on this case for her. We're very confident in the legal representation, but legal representation isn't free. We don't just have armies of lawyers working for us for nothing. The lawyers we connect with do need to get paid, and they give us very good rates. But they don't charge nearly as much as they could in many cases, but they still need to get paid something for their time, because there's many, many hours of legal work that are involved in these cases, and obviously they need to be compensated. So please consider that. Again, go to WeThePatriotsUSA.org, and you'll find the fundraiser right there on the homepage.
Can I ask real quick, what's the court that this case goes through? Family court?
Yeah.
State court?
It would be family court, right, Rachel?
It's the juvenile division of the circuit court is what I believe it is.
Yeah. See, I'll leave the technical stuff to her in Florida, because I don't practice there. There it is. There's the fundraiser. When you go to the homepage, it's right there.
Now, can we say the judge in the case, or are there multiple judges?
I'm not going to do that.
If you want to research it, John, and put it out later, that's fine. I think those of us who have to practice before courts, and also I don't have it at my fingertips. I'd have to go look it up.
I'm not discussing anything about the hearing or in the court file. The only thing I've been able to discuss publicly is things that were publicly disclosed long before the gag order. For instance, there was something I was looking at just before I came on this interview. A lot of the information in this case. There was an interview that Joy did where she gave a lot of the details in this case that we've discussed. I'm talking about specific medications and why her daughter was ostensibly taken from her, the events leading up to that. That was all publicly disclosed long before there was a protective order in place. That's been in the public sphere for a long time. So that kind of stuff, I have discussed or at least alluded to. But anything, like I said, I haven't actually even seen the case file, the actual case file, the court record. So I don't actually know everything that's in there. I can speculate, but I'm not going to. So yes, I would say let's respect the process, respect the protective order until and unless it's lifted. But things that have been in the public sphere for over a year now, obviously you can't unring the bell. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. That's been released for a long time.
John, I know we're trying to wrap up. I wanted to make one other comment if we have a couple of seconds. Can I do that?
Okay.
Sure. I want to say for other individuals, be it parents or anyone else that is facing what is clearly unjust conduct in that moment. I've been a victim of that. My son was the same age as Kenlee when we were in the hospital, and there was malpractice committed. And my son was in grave danger. And so I've seen this happen. I've also taken calls from people in desperate situations over weekends where they're being held in, say, like a psychiatric hold for 72 hours. Here in Florida, it's, Baker Act, where there's this supposed right to keep you against your will. In any of these situations, I just want to put it out there for people. You do as this mother did in that moment and hold your peace, keep track of what's going on, record it immediately after or during. But recognize that there is baiting going on. And I call it baiting because that's what happened to me. When you're in a position that the other person that's baiting you knows that it's a heightened emotional position and they treat you in such a way as to exacerbate or escalate that emotional response, you are not the person who is wrong for a moral outrage response. I think that's a proper response to injustice and tyranny and oppression. But if you act upon it, then you are now feeding, or you're allowing there to be a feeding of the record against you. And it's just not prudent. So to some degree, and to reiterate Brian's point about respecting the process, even if the process doesn't deserve our respect, it is prudent to walk through it carefully. And when you're in that situation, you need your child back. In my case, I needed to make sure my child got the health care that he needed at that moment. You need to advocate for the end goal. And it's very, very difficult, but I just want to exhort everybody to keep their head and keep track, and then also seek legal help thereafter, because we do need to hold people accountable for these kinds of behaviors. And if we don't, we're just going to see more of it.
I agree. And, take that energy. And if this judge is an elected official,
they are in this state.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well, we're definitely going to find out the name of this judge.
Yep.
But the judge is working off of the information provided under potentially fraudulent circumstances. So I'm very eager to bring Joy back. She was not the mother. She was not available. today. She was driving across the state for one of her supervised visits, so not able to join us, but apologize to everyone for misdirecting. She wasn't able to make it with us, but thank you all for taking time out of your very busy days to do this. I really hope we get a resolution to this quickly, and I hope that the two people that were in the video helping take the child are reallocated to something a little bit better suited for their natures.
Thank you so much, John. I just want to say for shedding light on this, for sharing this story. You're doing God's work, because this is being suppressed. Yes, it's going viral on social media, but I haven't seen any mainstream media really covering it.
They never do.
Yeah. So, and we're working on that. We're working on trying to get some coverage there as well. But thank you so much for using your platform to expose this to the light of day.
You bet. Thank you all. Have a great day, and we will be back next week.
I believe in the Constitution. I believe that one case, the right case, can change the world. If you believe this too, Freedom Council is for you. Pursuing a major case can be overwhelming, but we provide a community of practice so that you have the resources available to support your case. My name is Warner Mendenhall, and we are Freedom Council. Join Freedom Council today. freedomcouncil.org.